Good morning. Welcome to Plugged In, and we are still going to be in Daniel's story in Daniel chapter 1 right after this. And again, good morning. Welcome back. Glad to have you here on Plugged In. And I want to get a couple of things out of the way before this morning's lesson. The first one is this. I want to give you a plug, a little advertisement for this afternoon. The Carol and Will Save the Planet show will be back on for this afternoon at 4:30. And it is featuring the president from Americans Fair Taxation. His name is Stephen Hayes. So if you'd like to hear a little bit about that topic, I want to encourage of you to watch live at 4:30, maybe even send in your questions during that time. He might answer them before you ask them, and maybe you'll have something that would be intriguing for other people. So I want to encourage of you to do that and support that particular show. I also want to take a moment before I go into today's lesson to say thank you to those who watch this every week. The truth of the matter is, I don't know. I am not one of those that keeps up with who is following me or if anyone is following me. I don't have any clue. But I have an inkling that some people are watching, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time to either do it live or watch it sometime during the week. And I want to say thank you for challenging me. And this is kind of weird because I really seriously do not know of very many, if any, that watch it. And so I'm not getting responses, but I just have this vibe, if I can use that phrase, that there are people watching and your unsolicited or your anonymous viewing has been encouragement to me. It challenges me. And I'm going with that in the direction of Daniel especially. I grew up in church, had heard the stories of Daniel, but basically they centered around Daniel and his friends who were thrown in, or his friends who were thrown into the lion or the fiery furnace. We'll get there in chapter 3, or later in chapter 6 when Daniel is thrown into the lion's den. And those were the kind of two Sunday school stories that I heard. For whatever reason, I decided to start this series on Daniel, and my goodness, it's been 5 or 6 weeks maybe that we've been in chapter 1 alone, and it just seems that each week I'm ready to move on to chapter 2 or maybe chapter 3, and all of a sudden I find something else. And so thank you again, and I hope that whatever I'm presenting helps you in your walk with the Lord. So with all that said, there's not going to be a scripture put up on the screen. If you want to follow along, it's going to be in Daniel chapter 1, verses 18 to 20. If you're turning to that, I'm going to give you a second to get there. And as you're doing it, I'm going to give you the quick background. Daniel and his friends for 10 days have ate vegetables and drank water, while their peers have feasted from the grand table of the king, and they've drank the choice wine. And so Daniel's thing was he wasn't going to defile himself with the king's food, and his challenge was to the king's official to look at him and his friends and see if they were better looking, better in appearance and health-wise than those who had been eating from the king's table. Well, they were, okay? And that's just a kind of real quick recap. We're going to pick up verse 18 and see what the king's response was for this. So we open this morning with it this way. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them in, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal with Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them. He found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters of his whole kingdom. The king invites them in. He doesn't really interrogate them. I think he, in a sense, interviews them. And he is just astounded by what is going on in their lives and their physical appearance and their understanding of things. There are a couple of phrases in particular in this passage that grab my attention. The first one is this, that the king found no one to be an equal with Daniel and his friends. If you remember, the official of the king thought that if he deterred from having Daniel eat from the royal table, that it would mean his life, that he would lose his head. But really what turned out was he might have ended up becoming employee of the month. If you recall, the official was afraid to go against the king's way of training and by providing the recruits with choice food and drink. But with some convincing, Daniel won the official over, and Nebuchadnezzar was impressed. Second, we are told that Daniel and his friends are 10 times better. They are above and beyond, you might say, the other magicians and enchanters. The king had put them on his staff, which included astrologers who claimed to be able to tell the future through occult practices. These astrologers communicated their message in an authoritative manner as though it came from their gods. Well, Daniel's message did come from God, and it was not a God, it was the God, the creator of all living things, the one who, by his plan, had put Nebuchadnezzar in his position. Old Nebi, that's what I like to refer him to. He does not know, really, that he's part of God's plan, but he is very impressed with the wisdom and the knowledge and the understanding of these four men. Now, we might wonder, how did all of this happen? How did Daniel and his friends change the mind of the king? And ultimately, we know that God was behind all of that. But allow for me to give you some suggestions on the things that Daniel and his friends did in helping to contribute to this success. One of them is they learned about the culture. They were not naive about what was going around them. They were up to date. They weren't living in the past. They weren't using phrases like, well, these are not just the good old days. I wish we were back at that. They just caught up with where they were at, but they didn't allow for the culture to influence them. They just learned about the culture. They achieved excellence in their work. They wanted to please God in the work that they were doing, not just men. They served the people. When I was writing this, I remember a phrase that I heard some years ago that I've used at times in ministry. People don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. Now, I think maybe Daniel and his friends had that same motto. If it had been a motto back then. They served the people. And I think in turn it helped the people follow Daniel. They prayed for God's help. There was no way they could do this all on their own. They were not going to move forward by their own strength. And in the midst of all of this, here's a key thing. They maintained their integrity. They lived in the midst of this culture, yet they did not become part of the culture. It may seem at times that you and I as Christians, we seem to be overtaken in this world. Maybe that's because the media tries to drown us out. It is true, as in the words of Jesus, that the road leading to him is narrow and very few find it. It is true from the teachings of Jesus that in this world we will have troubles, but we are reminded that he has overcome the world. We are told by the Apostle John, one of Jesus' followers, when he's writing his first letter, he says to his readers, "Greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world." You know, as we approach the Lord's return, and we sure have no idea when that's going to be, although there was some talk about it last Monday with all the eclipse conversations. But when he returns, we're not going to know about it. It's not going to be announced, or it's not going to be forecasted. He's going to come like a thief in the night. But as we get closer to that day, you and I, as his followers, are going to face more and more opposition. But you know what? We are more than conquerors. And the above list of ingredients that helped to lead to Daniel's success are things that you and I can do as well. And if it worked for Daniel against the king of Babylon, it can work for us against whatever forces we may face. Thank you again for taking the time to watch this. Like it, share it, pass it along, and I pray that you have a wonderful day and a wonderful rest of the week. We will see you next Monday on Plugged In.